Cara Romero, I'm excited to be here. It feels like nervous, but I think I'm excited. And it's really great to be in a room full of Native people. A lot of times I get to share cross-culturally, but this is extra special, and I didn't feel like I needed to prepare too much, and that I could talk a little bit more about process, and there's going to be time for Q&A at the end, so if you have questions that you always wanted to ask, I'm here and would love to answer those. I'm going to start with a little bit of introduction, autobiography to where I'm from and who I am. I was born to interracial parents in the Los Angeles area, so Redondo Beach, Inglewood was the hospital. My parents were high school sweethearts. My dad is Chemehuevi, my mom is Anglo. And in 1979, the whole family relocated from the Los Angeles area to the Chemehuevi Valley Indian Reservation, which was newly reorganized in 1970 after termination and relocation. So there was a time during my childhood where my grandmother was chairman. She built the first 30 homes on the reservation, and this was a great time of transition where a lot of families were able to move back to the Chemehuevi Valley Indian Reservation for the first time since the flooding of Chemehuevi Valley, which is the Colorado River and what today is known as Lake Havasu, all of our ancestral homelands, and some of our families' homesteads are under that lake. We come from all over the desert, families from Las Vegas all the way out to Victorville, Hesperia area, and then all the way south to Parker. So 29 Palms Band of Mission Indians are Chemehuevis. There's a lot of Chemehuevis at Crit, the Colorado River Indian tribes. And then a lot of us disenrolled from Crit and came over to Chemehuevi Valley in 1970. We're in the heart of the Mojave Desert, so the hottest part of the United States, but the second most biodiverse place in the world behind the rainforest. So we grew up with a lot of critters, a lot of flora, a lot of fauna. Pretty typical reservation, HUD houses. The kids play outside all day long. There's a lot of fishing. There's hunters, and that's home. The landscape is desert patina. It's low basin, so that's how we're kind of the hottest desert is we're below sea level out there in California. And really Chemehuevis are known as the greatest of the Great Basin basket weavers. So a lot of times when we show up in museums for our white willow and devil's claw baskets. Our basket weaving arts are scarce in contemporary days. The materials are harder and harder to gather. The cultural transmission is harder and harder to facilitate between basket weavers and younger generations, but we still do have a few left, and we still do practice between Parker and Chemehuevi Valley every year, gathering and making baskets. Let's see, so when I ended up leaving the reservation was when my parents split, and I ended up in Houston, Texas. My mom's family had relocated from California to Houston. And so I ended up in a majority minority public school there in Houston, and it was quite the culture shock, but really early on I understood that in the cities, people had no idea who Chemehuevis were. They really didn't understand reservation life. I have a really clear understanding in elementary school at like Thanksgiving and Columbus Day of kids breaking out like oatmeal containers and banging on them like drums and putting on turkey feathers, and like just insane for a young person coming from the reservation kind of witnessing this stuff. And it was so disillusioning, and it was so humiliating, and I just didn't understand. And as I grew into a young woman, I think that I knew from a really early age that I wanted to tell stories about the beauty of our communities, about real lived experience of how beautiful and how culturally intact and how interesting our communities are, to give humanity back and really to bring us into contemporary times. we were absent from, accurate portrayal in media and academia, and not something that any of us are unfamiliar with. But I never saw photos in the magazines, and I think I was always really interested in people and photography, and I would pore through the pages of Life magazine. I was really interested in collaging from a young age and drawing. And while I didn't see any of us in these spaces, we grew up in a community with scrapbooks and shoeboxes of photos. And in these shoeboxes of photos were tremendous stories of beauty, of, people of the times, dressed in the people of the times. And I kind of had this realization that there was this great absence, but then there was this great presence within our homes and within our communities. It was almost like a parallel universe happening within our homes. On the left of this picture is my great-grandmother. Her name was Lillian Smith, and her daughter, Betty Smith, was my grandmother. Lillian was born in about 1900. She was, like many people of that era, not a U.S. citizen. California was one of the most difficult places. There wasn't anything more difficult, I don't think, than being a California Indian at the turn of the century. And my grandmother, through oral tradition, tells stories of being hidden in the basement of the ranch when people came by, because it wasn't just boarding schools, but California Native women in Southern California could be taken into indentured servitude. My great-grandmother would die from tuberculosis and orphan my grandmother and her little brother, who became wards of the state and were raised at Sherman Indian School. These beautiful stories, this is my great-uncle, Indian Johnny, fascinated me from a really young age, and these photographs fascinated me. They told stories of people of the time and cars of the time, and perpetuation of culture. And they were just really cool photographs, within our community, and I didn't see them anywhere else. And so when I first started out at IAA in 1999, I thought I would make really cool photographs. Out in the desert, I started in black and white, sepia-toned work, and this was a really interesting time to be a Native photographer because there weren't too many. There were some greats. There were Lee Marmon, Zig Jackson, Shelley Nero, Hulea Tsinigini. These were all a lot of my heroes, but it was hard to come by information about them. Photography was a medium that was not completely accepted within our communities. Sometimes it's still not. It's kind of like, I describe it as an outsider art. And then it had been really weaponized, against our communities. There were so many people making photography, taking from culture, and it really took a lot of Indigenous photographers, storytelling from within culture to begin to counter narratives and tell our own stories and indigenize the medium. And so it took me a long time to find my voice. Because at the very beginning at the Institute, a lot of us were, and even for a little while after that, we were emulating what Native photography was, which had really been defined from outside of the culture by ethnographic photographers like Curtis and Moon. And these photographs captured the world's imagination, but they also kind of stopped time, right? And so they stopped time in the sense of how we looked and how we dressed, and they were devoid of modern context. And so a lot of the photographers, when we were first starting out, were creating work of people in regalia, in landscape, devoid of modern context. And for a young person, that was a lot to unpack. And I think as Native artists, we continually unpack a lot of self-examination and looking at our work. For me, the guiding principle has been, am I giving back to community? And is this photograph telling a story that is appropriate? Is this giving representation, elevating voice? is this appropriate? Is this collaborative? Is this truthful? Does this tell an identity story? There's just many different things that go along with this idea of making photography, and is it giving back? So I really work in themes, but not like going out to work and saying this is the theme that I'm going to work on for years. My brain and myself is kind of like a pinball machine, and I'm working with people that are around me and things that are available to me and things that I'm excited by. And so I like kind of categorize things afterwards, because you have to categorize things. And so cultural landscape is this idea of not just the places that we're from, but how we are inseparable from our landscapes, and what the landscapes feel like, and what how it looks to view the place from where we're from. So there's a lot of ideas wrapped into our inseparableness from landscape. This is the exact place where my family is from, which is Nipton, California, right on the border of Nevada. And this is my stepson Santiago and my then baby Paris, standing out on the road in front of the Joshua trees. And this is the place I love. This is the place that is home, while Santa Fe has become my home away from home. The Mojave Desert is the place where my bones are from. And so these pieces, they became very staged and theatrical. I think a lot about this transition to making staged and theatrical work. And I did earlier on in my life want to be a photo documentarian and a photo historian. When I graduated from the Institute of American Indian Arts, I think I had my first business card, photo documentarian, right? And I became a mom. And when I became a mom, I couldn't leave the house for weeks at a time to go on photo essay or on photojournalism assignments. And so there was a long time where I wasn't making work. I was freelancing, but I wasn't making the work. And there was, several realizations along the way that, you have to make work as an artist and, often as a Native person to heal and to keep your heart happy. And so how was I going to make work? And this idea of staging these photographs was something that we had done. It was something that I had done from the beginning, but maybe I had forgotten it. And then as I would daydream and wash the dishes and fold the clothes, I would have these ideas for photographs. And so the process very much became imagining ideas before going out and trying to shoot them, because I could schedule things and produce things while I was being a mom and I was working, and then I could clear the calendar and say, okay, I'm going out to shoot today. So tomorrow is one of those days. Like everybody knows, like I don't have responsibilities at home. I get to go to the studio and make a photograph that we've been working on. I have folks helping me out. Telling stories of, representation, California Indian visibility is something that has been a tremendous responsibility and a tremendous joy to be able to bring photography from Southern California for a lot of people that may not know about us as we face kind of more invisibility and erasure than a lot of different tribes in the U.S. The photography is infused with a sense of humor, right? I would say first audience is other Native peoples. I think that that's really important for young people to see a photograph. I think all of us can see a photograph and know pretty quickly if it was made from within the culture or outside of the culture. And so I think by looking to all of you and to community, having Native audience as primary audience has been a guiding light for me. Environmental work is something that is really important to me as well. So telling stories about, not just the inseparableness from the landscape, but how, our communities and our ancestry through time and spirits in our landscape sense and feel the effects of resource extraction, of development of infrastructure, of environmental racism and big corporate energy going into the backyards of people of color. And this is something that we've been fighting for 500 years. Native peoples are on the front lines, whether it's gold in the Black Hills to hydroelectric energy flooding us out of our valleys. Just this constant history of declaring eminent domain and taking of landscapes that they declare as uninhabited but have long, rich histories of native occupation and story and mythos. Fusing Americana and pop culture was something that really started in the work about a decade ago, and I thought it was just funny, and I didn't really think at that point in my career that I was going to make it, which there was, I think, something really liberating about that moment for me a decade ago. And when I say that, the photography wasn't making it into museums, I was still doing shows, there weren't a lot of sales, I was falling on my face a lot, but I just still had this passion for making, and I think this is something that's super important, when we're looking at art as healing. And this idea of, not seeing women in museums, not seeing natives in museums, not seeing photography in museums, that's all changed in the last 10 years. American collections, American museums are having a day of reckoning with, racist, colonial ideologies of not including us in American collections and American museums, and so they're really scrambling to make up for that. And so I feel like, this long period of art making, we've been art making for a really long time. We're showing up with such a great force in the art world because we've never not been making, right? It's just they're finally giving visibility and noticing, and I'm so happy for things like Jeffrey Gibson and Deani Whitehawk and these people that are making huge statements on the world stage for Native community. That's really exciting. And so anyways, pop culture mixed with indigeneity is, I think, at the very beginning, a tool that became this idea of how photography had been weaponized. And one of the ideas that I would think about is that people from outside culture often take photographs of Native people for what they think is interesting about us, right? Which is often ceremony, regalia. It can, we can think of the words like mystic and magical and romanticized. And I think that there's a whole part of art making that is really important. That's part of our spectrum. And then there's, all 1,000 different stories, right, of how we're sitting in a room in a hotel, we're putting food on the table, we're funny, we're going to school, we're going to college, and all of these are infused into our collective consciousness as ideas of who we are in contemporary times. And this was kind of a moment to flip the lens metaphorically and say, we're here and we understand contemporary culture too. It's kind of countering this idea that we're historic, that we're bygone. It has a lot of sense of humor within our community, and then that truth and authenticity kind of emanates outside of our community, where non-Native people can, understand very quickly what's going on here. And so it does a lot psychologically, not just the lighting, but the narrative of the piece. And so we're saying we understand biblical stories and we study Western art. And so it became kind of a moment to indigenize these ideas, a tool to do that. This piece, Coyote Tales, was, kind of this idea of wanting to still examine the way we show up in contemporary times as we are, but how we carry mythos and story with us from a really long time ago. And Coyote is our fabled trickster. He's the one that shows up when he's about to make the wrong decision. And so, anyways, this was taken up in northern New Mexico in a spot called Espanola, at a really iconic neon sign. So it's got all of that like nerdy photography stuff of like, oh my gosh, I have to document the iconic neon sign, but then it's got this kind of a warning story, you know, when Coyote shows up, the fabled warning story. And this was a really great collaborative effort. We talked a lot of story about lowriders in northern New Mexico and how Native people fit into sub-pop, you know, how we're listening to heavy metal and hip-hop and showing up in lowrider culture, but we don't really see those representations out there and like asking questions of why, you know. And so this was really fun. I rented, it's called a balloon light from a construction company, and that's how we're making like the nighttime glowy light out there. And this one is TV Indians, another, probably the most complicated endeavor. This was a really fascinating experience. During 2017, I had received an award through the Native Art and Cultures Foundation. It was the first time that I had unrestricted money to make art. And so I thought I could really pursue these weird ideas that I might be scared to spend money on. But this grant was a really powerful grant in my career that I could really, play and not be worried about spending money on crazy ideas. And so I was looking at consumerism and this idea of new ruins in the landscape, and really thinking about the beautiful ruins in the New Mexico landscape, and had this idea of bringing TVs of kind of representing these new ruins in our contemporary landscape. And so I found a place where we could place the TVs. They don't have TVs at the thrift stores anymore. I thought I would go buy some TVs at the thrift stores, but they don't collect box TVs. And so I started calling around and found the Albuquerque Recycling Center. And I said, can I borrow a bunch of TVs and I'll bring them back to you on Monday? And they were like, and so I was telling my friend about the experience. I said, no, you got to tell him that you're with the New Mexico film industry. And I was like, really? You think that'll work? He said, it'll work, And so I called them back and I was like, yes, my name is Cara Romero and I'm with the New Mexico film industry and we need about 30 TVs for a film set. They're like, okay, we'll get them ready for you. And so I went down there and I had this movie truck and we picked up the TVs, and I had found a place overlooking Galisteo Basin, and that was really important because the horizon line needed to be like kind of unfettered. Like you couldn't have a mountain in the background because you wouldn't have that great separation, which is where like drawing comes in to making these photographies and imagination first. And we had decided to put imagery of how Native people show up in this like really bizarre, stereotypical way over the last 60 or 70 years in film. And we have intertribal Pueblo representation in the foreground. And while it's kind of a dreamscape, it's also kind of speaking to the really stark contrast between the way we're portrayed as TV Indians or Hollywood Indians and how we show up in real life. And it would remind me of stories of when my grandmother would tell me that they really didn't have the same effects of the Great Depression, right? And how we're living kind of in these parallel, culturally private ways compared to how we're portrayed in contemporary America. And so it kind of has all of those ideas going on. This one was made to look like the silent movies, and it speaks to the impacts of the train coming through the Southwest and its effects on our artwork, our pottery, our baskets, our weavings, from all the way through the Southwest and out into California. And so it's got this damsel in distress. So we're wondering, what's going to happen. And these pieces of environmental indigenous response took me to making multiple underwater series about the effects of flooding, both historically, presently, and in the future. And so these pieces are called Water Memory, and they feature people that have been affected by flooding historically, presently, or in the future, between flooding after wildfires, of lands being declared eminent domain and ending up on a chunk of clay where they found oil, and being flooded out of ancestral homelands in Oklahoma as well. Chemehuevi women are really strong. We're taught from a really young age that we have great strength, that we can speak, that we can take up space. Our governance is very gender equitable. We often have majority women on council. This is something that I think is unique to our community, and rare in Native photography, to have images of strong Native women. And so I think when we're making art, a lot of autobiography comes through in our making, and we tell stories that are true to ourselves, because if they're true, they can't be wrong, right? And so sometimes making this work of Native women has been, for me, a way to counter lowbrow stuff that's out there, to give back to Native women ideas of strength and medicine and supernatural, to empower life-giving abilities. And most of the people that show up in the photography, I feel like when I'm making them and I'm looking through the final edits and the woman looks omniscient, like she knows everything, I'm like, that's the one. So you'll see a very powerful gaze with many of the Native women in the pieces, and this is giving back empowerment. These pieces were around First Americans and this idea of the paucity of celebration of individual identity and diversity, and the high fashion and craft and arts of regalia making in our communities. And they were kind of a response to my husband and his family having a long history of collecting dolls. So there's dolls all over our house. Action figures. Okay, there's action figures all over our house. And, a lot of them are still in the boxes. And I look at these G.I. Joes from the 1960s. And I think what struck me was the incredible amount of historic accuracy, the incredible amount of detail, the French soldiers with the exact boots that they wore and the exact artillery and the proper camouflage and headwear. And take that to the Navajo code talkers, and it just goes on, these incredible dolls. And his mom had those also, and at the time Cricket was 11, and there was like one First American girl doll, and she was Ojibwe. And of course we bought it for her, and we made her Coachty clothes, her grandmother and I, and tried to kind of like gift that back. And so that was kind of how these were born of. And I'm shooting another one of these tomorrow I'm really excited about, but it's an ongoing series. This, of course, have to shout out to Leah Matafrawa in the audience today. This is her daughter, Naomi, and they became a real collaborative, intergenerational effort of looking to what the appropriate cultural accoutrement was for each person, what is the proper vernacular for each tribe to use. Of course, with the California one, we knew we wanted to go hot pink and black and white. It was just screaming California. And just had a great amount of fun making these, and we'll make more. This is Julia. She's from Cochiti and San Ildefonso, and has the Cochiti pottery designs of the wild spinach and the rain clouds. Her grandma's blue corn and her great-grandpa's drum. And so things from around the house. And I think it's a cross-cultural educational tool to be able to just counter this idea of monolith culture, and celebrate how incredibly diverse we are. And, it just began to reinforce so many things about how each of our regalias really come from our bioregions, and how the health of our regalia making practices began to speak to the health of the ecosystem and to the health of culture, and how regalia making is something that kind of exists against all odds, but it's something that we have and has come through time, it's come through a really long time. I think I'm missing something in my jacket pocket. If you could see if there's a paper in one of those pockets. I don't need it right this second, but wanted to move through the work that I did in community with Los Angeles First Peoples. It was through the Indian Collective Radical Imagination Grant, which happened smack dab in the middle of the pandemic and lockdown. And I thought I wasn't going to be able to make the work. I had this idea that I would work in my pod, right? We were like working in our pods, and I called Leah Mata, who was here working in solitude over at SAR also, and we kind of embarked on this endeavor where we would combine our pods in a healthy way, and we would make this work and tell story about what it was like to be from a tribe that's displaced along the coast, one of the 18 unratified, and how the tribes from the coast of California are non-federally recognized, and how I learned so much as somebody from a tribe that is federally recognized in California, and how they had not only been colonized by waves of genocide, but also by other Native people in some of these spaces where, like in Los Angeles and some of these areas, LA having the highest number of Native people, I think behind Manhattan in the United States, folks from federally recognized tribes have more benefits and resources than the original caretakers of those places without their federal recognition. And so while I went into this endeavor thinking I would tell one story, I ended up telling a really different story on the billboards, and ended up actually sharing the billboards with Tongva folks from the area, and made a separate body of work. This one is called Oil and Gold, and Leah helped to make all of the regalia and helped tell the story. This is both of our daughters in the piece. One's regalia is dipped in gold and the other in oil, which is, in the most contemporary waves of displacement, the reasons why folks along the coast were displaced. And this is Wishoyo. She is a Tongva descendant from the Los Angeles area, and we told another underwater story because they're Pacific peoples, and I had never seen their regalia, and I learned about how they collect abalone, and they're fisher people, and they have giant keyhole limpets as part of their regalia. So it became an incredible learning experience. Leah made this ballet costume. It was custom made for cricket. That's part of the documentary if you want to watch the behind the scenes of making of this piece. Is a really powerful moment for a young woman of color to be able to get up there and dance and be recognized for being a dancer in a contemporary time. And this was also work that was made during that time. More recently, the work is centered on Indigenous futurism. Were you guys able to find that piece of paper? Thank you. Okay. Indigenous futurism is, imagining ourselves in healthy futures. So much of the mantra, thank you. So much of the mantra became, my entire life. And from the 60s, American Indian movement was like, we are still here, we are still here. And I loved when Indigenous futurism showed up because it was like the first time I was witnessing Afrofuturism and all of these marginalized cultures imagining themselves healthy in the future. And I was like, that's awesome, right? And so sitting back and watching the genre, I think a lot of times we're problem solving through our own mechanisms of art making, and I'm like, what does it mean? How do we speculate a future that we want to be in? I think some people are continuing to imagine, post-apocalyptic futures. I think, we've already survived apocalypse as Native people, and that's one thing that we talk about a lot, that we're in survivance and looking towards healthy futures. For me, each of these pieces takes something really, really old and brings it into the future in just kind of a fun, playful way, right? We're speculating about sci-fi. It's a very playful area. These were made during a time when I felt like I really needed to play and have fun. They're shot with blue gel lights over the lights. They're not painted blue. It's not done in Photoshop. So instead of bursting daylight onto the young women in the photograph, it's blue light that's flashing on them. And then this is digital illustration. So it takes a long time to take portions of, they were high resolution images of objects, artifacts that had high resolution imagery of vernacular, visual vocabulary from each of their tribes. So on the left is Leah Kolakowski, she's Ojibwe, and in the center is Ka Falwell. She has multiple ancestral Puebloan vessels digitally illustrated onto her. And then on the right is Pishon, and those are her family's traditional parfleche designs, and they're kind of inverted, and so it takes days to kind of like wrap them around their arms and their pregnant bellies, and the wires are really not them plugged into the outside world, but the idea that the world needs to plug into the hearts and the minds and the life-giving power of Indigenous peoples, right? So going back to original instructions and Indigenous science and ways that we've lived in reciprocity with environment and ecosystem and kinship for a very long time. And this one, Leah, she's in the reflection in her sunglasses. She can see the dances that they've danced in her community for a very long time. And this is also done with green light flashing on her in front of a pink background. And this one is really fun to show with George in the audience. This one's called The Zenith, and this one is really speaking to absolute playful and fun, but bringing heirloom corn into the future, right? I think a lot of times as in mainstream society, we're really interested in how fast is our internet going to be? What kind of gas or electricity are our cars going to have? What's the bandwidth going to be? What's artificial intelligence? But really none of it matters if our food systems are not intact and we're not taking the things with us that we've had for thousands of years into the future. And so this is a great behind-the-scenes video I just wanted to share. You won't be able to hear the sound, but that's okay. So that was a sketch that I showed, kind of showing how they all start with a sketch and what it's like in the studio making. We're hanging up all of the corn around, which took us, I guess, several hours, but I had already failed and knew that this was going to be the technique that we would need to use. It was really awesome that George showed up with a leisure suit. Can't make that stuff happen on your own. And so this is kind of like what a raw file looks like, and then they're taken into photo illustration and made into this idea of, supernatural happening in everyday life. That was kind of a little bit about the portfolio. Fox, if you could help me switch over. I wanted to talk a little bit about, the business of art. And so I'm going to do kind of a quick transition. I've come a long way in 10 years. I went from just a commitment to showing at Indian Market and Herd, not really making my money back in 2013, 2014, and it just continued to be something that I was committed to kind of as my side hustle. Art making, it was kind of that idea of I might not make it or ever be able to be a living artist and not have a regular day job. But I love this. And for me, Indian Market and Herd is showing up with community. It's kind of like ceremony. I feel like I get to see people. We get to come together every year and be part of something. And it's sacrifice and it's, tears and it's stress. And it's not that different than any other ceremony back home, right? And anyways, through this commitment of making art for Indian Market, a few things started happening. I still only make about, on a good year, 7 or 8 pieces, on a slow year, 5 or 6. But I was showing up to these 2 shows 6 months apart with new artwork. And it was something that for me, having a deadline and an exhibition and a place to show, I could identify within myself that this makes me make art. This makes me drink coffee at 9 o'clock at night and get it done, and taking it all the way to presentation. And I would feel the deadline coming up, and so I would make. And so after the first, 1 or 2 years, a few successes, maybe in the second year, a few more successes in the third year. And I started to build a really powerful portfolio that did not exist. It didn't exist before. I graduated with a portfolio from school that I felt like wasn't reflective of the artwork that I wanted to make. And I thought, what's going to happen when I get up to 20 pieces that are in this body of work that are all really, really strong? And so kind of like clockwork, when I hit that 20 images of really strong work, it felt like things kind of broke wide open. And anyways, I think at the forefront of everything is this idea of making art, and that you have to constantly make new art. We talk about art a lot around the house, and one of the things that we talk about at Market is that you always have to show up with new artwork. Even if you have something really good from last year and it didn't sell and you really want to show it because you think it's going to sell, we just have a rule around the house that you can't show it. Like, you always have to show up with new art. And I think a lot of the people that are looking at art at particular shows or wherever you're showing are looking for a consistency of showing up again and again with new ideas. And this is also just like a healthy practice because our creative process is like forever renewable. It's like this never-ending ground spring of ideas. And so this is like a really healthy place where we're constantly pushing ourselves. We also like joke around like you always have to outdo yourself, like you always have to make something better. And I think that that's another beautiful thing about art making is that, no matter the decade or the years that go by, you continue to get better, right? You continue with practice to hone your craft, to get better and better. I don't think we talk about our failures enough. Our art making practice is a spiritual practice. It is something that we have to continue to problem solve and work around failures, but continue to make. And I guess there's been some things that have helped me, and so take them or leave them. I just wanted to impart to all of you, because I think half of you are business fellows. I'm so sorry I forgot to say congratulations to all of you for all of these incredible fellowships that you've achieved, and thank you to First Peoples Fund for bringing me. Some of the things that have helped are learning how to sell artwork and learning how to talk about artwork. There have been some people that have been really pivotal in kind of watching them sell artwork, but really how to talk about artwork, to outside folks, and to folks within community. And I think we become artists with this idea of, oh gosh, I never have to talk again, you know? But really, like, you end up having to talk and write more than you ever did, because you have to explain what's going on, whether it's narrative or whether it's more process-oriented. We have to be able to talk about it, and it takes practice. And so I just encourage everybody to practice talking about it and writing about it. And if you can't do that yourself, then you're looking at ghost writers, or, you know, maybe it's chat GBT, or you're looking at gallery representation. And so I've kind of had both gallery representation as well as representing myself. I started representing myself through the markets, and was still having a lot of success selling work out of the studio. And I began at the very beginning just investing everything back into the small business. So if I remember I made my first $1,700 sale at Indian Market. I think it was 2014, and I could have just died and gone to heaven. And I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with this money? And so I reinvested it back, and I put a down payment on a studio and on half of a printer that I would share with another photographer, and I began printing my own work. And that was probably one of the best moments, is just continuing to say, I'm going to work this job so I have money to pay all of my bills, but all of my art money kind of became my play money. And this was money that I didn't have to share with my husband or my family. This was money that I could just, you know, kind of gamble on my own to invest in this small business. And of course, you know, he was incredibly supportive of that. That always helps too. But investing in the business was in the red for, you know, the first couple of years. And I remember really struggling with learning to invest in myself and not being okay coming, you know, I didn't grow up in poverty, but I grew up, you know, below the socioeconomic median. And so, you know, there's been plenty of times in my life where I was worried about how I was going to pay the electric bill, or I had to eat ramen for a month until that check came in. And I think when you kind of are coming from that mindset, this health of finding financial stability has been critical in my life. I took financial fitness classes here in Santa Fe. I highly recommend that. It really taught me how to feel differently about money. So instead of associating money with shame, anger, and fear, it was something that I felt like I had a much better relationship with. And I was able to get my credit score perfect, and I was able to learn how to save money. I was able to learn how to invest money into the small business making practice. And I feel like that idea of investing in your art making practice as a small business has been another kind of critical and key role or milestone that's happened in my life. And I think one of the major milestones was, okay, I really want to make artwork, and I think I'm going to have to do commercial photography mixed with the fine art photography in order to make ends meet. And I remember Diego was like, no. He was like, you've already made it. You're already, you know, making fine artwork that's in museums, and he's like, you've arrived. And I took that into heart, and I wrote a business plan. And I just was like, how am I going to approach this? But writing a business plan, no matter what your art making process, for me was pivotal, because in that business plan, it was as simple as, I am going to make large scale fine art prints at low editions. And it began to manifest and kind of channel all of the energy for how I was facing outward in the world, what I was doing in the studio, what equipment that I needed to accomplish that. And everything else kind of fell away. And that became kind of the beginning of branding myself, which was another, I think, really pivotal moment was learning to brand yourself. And I didn't know how to do that. I don't know that we talk enough with each other about how to approach the business side of things. I think for a lot of us as artists, it's a very icky thing to talk about because we come through fine art school and we're like, it's not about money, but it is. But it's not, we don't want it to be. And so like this is like great tension and push and pull and, all of those different feelings about money. And money is like, it's like this very energetic, weird thing, that we can learn how to manage in our practice. I talked to Carrie Atombi. I admire her entrepreneurial abilities, and she said, I just hire somebody. I was like, you can do that, And so I consulted with somebody. It was like a really reasonable price, and she took over my social media, which for me was huge because I'm too shy, and it's not really like easy to be like, oh my gosh, I'm at this museum and this is what's going on and these things are on sale. I'm like, like I just can't do it, And so really looking at social media is simply a marketing. And I think, it's hard. It became less about family and less about, sharing photos of my kids. It became maybe healthy in the way that it was not about socialization anymore, because I feel like social media is like a really dangerous thing. It is a really dangerous, weird, icky, laterally violent like kind of place. And I only approach it as a business tool, as a marketing tool. And she helped me rebrand. Everything has to be Cara Romero. It was so simple, right? So I was still using like old monikers and things like that. And I had to kind of pick one thing to create consistency across website, across social media, across everything that was coming out. And, some people choose to use a different business name. I chose to use my name. It's a really common practice with photographers and 2D artists, and that was a decision for me. Along the lines of marketing and that business plan, you can look it up, the 5 channels of marketing. This has kind of been my golden rule of approaching marketing in a very formulaic way from business schools. I'm kind of self-taught in some of this. I'm not kind of self-taught. I'm self-taught. I never went to business school. But these things work, right? And as artists, I think it's fine to just use formulas that work. The 5 channels of marketing is looking at how are you advertising yourself in 5 different ways, right? Can you hit 5 channels? Can you pull an ad in a print magazine? Can you get on a radio station? Can you have 3 social media accounts? That's 3 social channels. Can you send out an email newsletter? How can you get to 5 is like a critical mass, right? When you're going to feel a tipping point in spreading the word about your work, about your brand, if you want to call it that. And it takes work, and then as things start to flip from, paying to play or investing in yourself, that's a really like hard time, I think, for us as artists, because it's associated with feeling like failure, right? But really we're just investing in ourselves and in this career. So the 5 channels of marketing, try and hit 5. I think right now I have like Facebook Professional and Instagram. I pay somebody to do those posts, $300 a month. She also helps with newsletters. $300 a month seems like a lot, but one ad in one of the magazines, like a full page ad that people pay attention to, can be anywhere from $1,200 to $3,000. I feel like the social media has probably been the most, like where people are going back to the website. I'm getting the most for my money, I think, is through the social media, and it's free. And if you can do that stuff for yourself and separate yourself from that ickiness of, posting about yourself and your work, hats off, and if you can't, then maybe you can find somebody to help you do that, a friend, a kid, right? And this idea of donor management software was something that we worked with in the nonprofit, but it was really about making sure that you were thanking people and making sure that people had shown that they were interested in your work, that you continue to communicate thankfulness to them, and then ongoing business support. So I have thousands of cards from Indian Market that are entered into a mailing list. You can get really good about that. I have the organizational skills of a 6-year-old, and I'm kind of a disaster, but this email list is so important, and you need to keep an email list. MailChimp is free up to 5,000 emails. You could do it through, I don't know, some of the Mac stuff and the Google stuff gets a little bit complicated for me, but whatever you're good at, I don't care if it's like a piece of paper and an old-fashioned phone book. This is your most important part of your business, is anybody that you've met from a museum, anybody that you've ever met at a show. All of your family should be on that list. And then you can send them e-newsletters. Not everybody's on social media. That's a really interesting study. Social media goes up to, obviously youth are on there, our peers are on there. There are so many museums and curators on social media. It is not even funny. Like, that is where so many folks are getting their information. So it's really important to be like professional, outward facing on your social media. And then there's a lot of people that are not on social media. I would say often from an older generation that are reading their emails, and they want to get an email from you, and they want to know what's going on in your life. And so just to practice, I do about 3 or 4 emails a year. This is kind of like an area where I still feel like it's forced for me. I'm just like so shy, but the girl that helps me with my social media also helps me draft emails, and then they're not in my voice, and I'm like, don't send that out, that's horrible. And then I'll go in there and like correct everything so it's in my voice, but they've been a really valuable tool. As I continued to earn money, and I still invest, back into the small business, I decided to create an e-commerce site. And this was in 2018, and it was just something that I thought I'd try. I didn't really have gallery I had one major gallery show at the time. I had a friend that could do web design that was familiar with e-commerce. It cost me like $1,500 or $1,800 in order to create an e-commerce site that was like fully functional, with like a really secure way to take credit cards and have products on there. And I thought, well, my dad was dying and he needed one of those oxygen machines, and they cost like $4,000, and I had just shown up in the National Geographic with coyote tails, and I thought, well, what if I do 100 prints for $100, and I'll try this e-commerce site out and I'll see how it goes. And I really didn't have too many expectations. I had never shipped out artwork or done that type of art handling. But I put the advertisement out, I think it was like Black Friday on November, and I sold 60 prints in a month, and I was able to buy my dad the oxygen machine, and mostly I was like successful, this e-commerce site, and that was just like kind of dabbling my toes in the water, but it was like the floodgates opened wide open. And you have to get people their art promptly, and you have to be great on customer service, and you have to be able to art handle perfectly and handle your art as if it's as expensive as it is. But when this is more than 50% of my income is online sales, and people see the prints in other spaces. That's kind of like a marketing channel. I think of museums actually, like, you're not often getting paid to show your work in museums, but this is a space where thousands of people are seeing your work. They need to have a place to then go find you and buy it. For me, that's been through the e-commerce site in a lot of different ways. And anyways, that was an incredibly effective. We're constantly working on the website. This is a new website, and so this is the e-commerce portion. We'll see if I can click into there, where people are able to go into the different sections, or you can view everything, and you can click on things that you want to buy. It was also important to create a portfolio, and there's 2 ways that the portfolio show up. I'm just going to pause here on the portfolio. Documenting your work is priority. You have to save all of the images of your work and be able to show that body of work, so that's critically important. Even if it was 10 years ago, find those images, get help with digitizing the images, creating an online portfolio. And that's just a critically important portfolio. There's events and things that are going on here. The bio and CV, you're going to get asked 2 or 3 times a week for this. You need to spend time creating your CV or your resume. People need to be able to look at that really quick. And that's more documentation. So document. Every time you're in a show, every time you get the fellowship from First Peoples Fund, every time you show up in a magazine, every time you show up in a museum, every time you win an award becomes part of your CV. And that's going to come in handy with applying for grants, so on and so forth. Let's see if I can get out of this. There we go. And press media, this is a lot of folks coming to investigate your work and who you are. You want to have it all available on a website. You can do, this is through Squarespace. I had somebody that was much better at the stuff than me make it, but this is, I think, a top priority as far as investing in yourself. I felt like the one that I had made for myself was kind of outdated, so I actually had somebody just redo my website as, just ongoing investment in self. I wanted it to be cleaner. I wanted it to be, it was just like messy. Like I had just kept adding stuff there, for like the last 10 years, and it was working, but I was like, no, I think it could just be something that's better and more reflective. And then, I think paying your taxes is really important. We don't talk about that. But I think about like moments where we as artists or just people, have moments where there's times for like self-sabotage, right? And pay your taxes, stay up on it. I look at like the times that I haven't paid my taxes and I end up owing penalties and fees and like the incredible stress and losing sleep at night and getting the audit letter as like moments of like, why did I do that? Is there something that was going on psychologically where I wanted to fail? And so I look at paying taxes of like, I don't want to fail, so I'm going to pay my taxes, right? And so they'll come after you as artists. They're tracking you. They know what's going on here in New Mexico. And so let's see. I think I continued to save my money, and I just kept saving and saving and saving. There's probably some psychological problems there about why I kept saving the money, but it was time to invest the money, and a couple of things happened. I was doing the e-commerce work. I was only getting a few shows and galleries here and there. I had started self-representing not just through the booths at Indian Market, but I would kind of joke, like, I could sell more art out of the back of my car than they could at some of the galleries around town. And I was like, what is that? Like, we're really good salespeople. Not everybody is, my husband's awful. He really needs a gallery. He needs somebody like doing all of that. Like he won't answer an email or the phone, or, he doesn't have an email. So like if you're more in that category, like you're going to need to work with somebody that's good at all of that stuff, and just kind of identifying like if you want to take this stuff on. I found a property that the price had dropped like way down during the pandemic, and so I actually bought it, and I think I might want to be one of the only Native commercial property owners in downtown Santa Fe, which I think is huge. Thank you. Which is also really messed up because the whole, art market here is, based on Native art. And so I am sharing the space for the first time last year and this year. It was a good investment. And instead of giving half of my money to somebody that owns most of Santa Fe, I'm able to share with employees and by investing in the property and keeping the money local. And those were all things that were really important to me as far as what I was going to do with my money, right? Like I said, I think money is like energetic, and I think we can be really good with it. This is some things that I've done to get where I'm at today. I'm really an open book, so if you guys have any questions, I think we're coming up to the Q&A right now. If I can give you any insight about things that have worked for me, or if you have questions about the artwork, now's the time. Thank you for listening to all of that.
Let me see. This is working. There's questions. I have a mic. I can
I'm interested in getting, so I'm a musician, and so I do come from a little bit of a different angle, but I'm interested in getting social media help, and I'm wondering if where you found that resource.
So I found it through a friend, and I'm happy to share her name with you after we're done. It's Crowley Communications, Crowley, and she's based out of Phoenix, and she represents a few artists in the Native community, just helping them do that stuff. There might be others also, and I don't know what you would Google to find them, but I think she's PR, marketing, branding, that sort of thing.
Hi, Chrissy. Thanks for your words. It's nice to kind of meet you and hear your story. I guess my question is very similar to that. That's what I applied for, is help with my website. I kind of made it, and I kind of joked that like maybe a 15-year-old could have made this, and a 15-year-old would probably make a better website. How do you vet someone to make your website? When you look for people, or it's like going to look for a gallery, when you go to their website, it's like, we're the best, more looks and clicks, and I don't even know, you have a really clean website. How do you vet somebody for that?
So both times I actually worked with friends that I knew were doing web design. So I think somebody that does it for a living, for sure, not, we can all, like I said, create a website. It's difficult. There's people that can do special coding. So I think looking up web designers and finding people and also knowing it would be great if anybody else wants to share Native web designers that are doing it here in the community. Maybe we can start an email thread where we share some of that information. But people can also do it remotely. You can look in a different city and geography. I think the most important responsibility for you as an artist going out to do website making is that you're going to have to provide all of the content in a really clean way. So you need to make sure all of your photos are in order, that all of your, images are ready to put what you want. Like if you want a portfolio and an e-commerce site, if you just need it to have the basic things, you probably need to have a pretty good headshot. You need to have all of your ducks in a row before you go out. And then I don't think it's too complicated for them. So one of the things that, I tend to do is always get 3 quotes. So knowing what you want and then asking for 3 quotes for people. But my guess would be you could get something really robust between $1,000 and $2,000. That's like professional and it, everything's working. And then the other important thing that I didn't mention is I think it's really important to go through like Squarespace or maybe some other platform that you can then manage on your own, and they teach you how to add more photos. It's not that hard. Maybe it is hard, depending on your digital experience, but you should be able to manage that website if that's something that you want to do without them, or you've built into your budget, like I can't do that, and so are you going to be available to help me add more stuff and change it down the road?
And so when you mentioned e-commerce, that was the website that you're talking. Those are kind of the same?
So yes, so you can build a website and then you can add an e-commerce like portion to your website. And the first time I did it, I actually did it in phases. So the first was like I could only afford the website, and I asked them how much it would be to build out the e-commerce site, and I paid in 2 different chunks, like a year apart. So okay, I'm ready for the e-commerce site now. Yeah. Yes. Oh.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
I had a question when you were talking about the e-commerce site, and one thing I'm running into, I'm at a transitional place of wanting to do that, but I was wondering if you had any input on your print production, if you would recommend doing that in-house or outsourcing. I've had a lot of problem trying to outsource and getting quality that feels right, and then I feel like it's going out there and it's not really like how you said about the person writing emails and it's not your voice.
Yeah.
That's what I'll feel like with my work sometimes, where it won't feel like I have that kind of last say in what's going out there.
Are you a photographer?
No, I'm an artist, painter, but I'm
prints.
moving into doing prints
Okay.
of some of my work.
So I think what I would recommend for a painter doing this kind of work is also finding a photographer that does this kind of okay.
Photography, so.
Or finding the person that's making the archival inkjet prints on various types of paper that you want. I would find somebody that has a proofing process. So you're sending them a file, but you have some way to see the proof and artists proof it before they make more. I think the really complicated like chicken and egg relationship is whether you have enough money to print the whole edition or if you have to print as you go. We've had some fumbles through the between Diego and I. For Diego, making more like multiples of lithographs, it's really important to get the whole edition and have that, that you can then send out. So I would recommend printing the whole edition at one time or a large portion of the edition. That way, once it's dialed in. Printing your own work is a learning curve of anywhere from 6 months to a year. It is the way that I prefer to do it because if it's 3% off, it's off. If the contrast doesn't look right, it's going to make you cringe and you're going to see it in a museum next year and it's going to make you cringe and want to die, right? And so I've had that experience. You also, I think anything that you're sending out anywhere, it's often more expensive. Make sure it's archival. So be really careful with your printers on the substrates that they're printing on. Do your own research on the specs and make sure that it's high definition pigments that they're using. Make sure you're signing your work, not with Sharpies, with archival pigment pens, with archival pencils. Make sure that when you're packaging it, it's in archival clear bags, so on and so forth. Yep.
Do you have a recommendation for pigment pens for prints?
I think you can just look at, I think they say like archival pigment on the side. And they sell them at all the art stores. They look like Sharpies, but mine are like light brown and have black writing on them. Yeah.
Hi, Cara. Thank you very much. Hey, just a quick question on the product price mix that you have on your e-commerce site. From thousands of dollars to a few dollars. Just in general, kind of, is 80-20, how does that look for you?
That's a really good question. So one of the things that I didn't know about or expect in the business side of things is that when I went for the commercial loan, you have to give them all of that information because their risk asset manager asks you all kinds of crazy questions, and you have to do a lot of calculations or get help making those calculations. It was 55% small sales, 45% large museum sales, and I was shocked. I think you pay attention to those large sales and they come through and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that, and a lot of times those sales are not through the website, they're through email correspondence, and they prefer to do it that way, museums, very rarely buy from the website. Usually it's like collectors that have seen it somewhere that will, anyways. But I was really shocked to find out that all of the small sales actually added up to 55% of my income.
CEO Cara, thank you so much for talking to us today. Cricket is actually Dana Tiger's niece, and I love Dana.
Aww.
She's one of my really good friends. 2 questions real quick. Did you have a recommendation for donor management software that you use? And then whenever it comes to being an artist and expanding your work and your gallery and things like that, how many people do you say help you with your life? So you have like one social media person, do you have like a tax accountant person?
Yeah.
How many employees do you have? Like, I think it would be nice to get an idea of like how many people are on like your team.
Yeah. There was a first question to that.
Yeah, donor management.
Donor management. Okay, sorry, thank you. So right now I'm just doing it through MailChimp, and I just have the MailChimp address, and it's coming through Squarespace, capturing everybody's information there, and then it automatically populates MailChimp. That's not the best. Donor management software I would recommend is Salesforce. I'm just about to start with them now. I feel like it's very visually user-friendly, and the other one that I feel like is really visually user-friendly is Monday.com. They both come at a price. I've looked at a lot of them. I'm like an Apple Mac person because of the visuals, so those two I recommend as far as like visually I can find where things are. When I have to use that part of my brain, it will work with those specific websites. Salesforce comes with Slack also, which is really fun. I'm not using those right now. And then, it's kind of like just important that you're capturing the information, and maybe at some point, like me, I don't have somebody doing all of that data entry. I still have all of my old order books that I hope go into that donor management software. But right now I'm able to do it between Squarespace and MailChimp, getting those emails out. Squarespace, I also have QuickBooks. And QuickBooks, between those two, will help me pull out. I send gifts to people that spend over $1,000 every year. And so I'll send out gifts to those folks. And that's like something that's important, is just always giving thanks, always touching back to people that have helped support you. And I feel like they're donating to my life and my family, so I kind of approach it the same. I work 2 jobs and have 3 kids. And so I was only able to do so much until the spinning plate started to fall off. And I knew right away that I needed a studio assistant to help manage the printing and the art handling and the shipping and handling. Everything else I was taking care of by myself. And then Kate Crowley was helping with the social media, so that was where it started. They were both on contract. I was still doing everything under my social security number. So as a DBA, there is a critical moment where if you're making a certain amount of money, you need to switch over to an LLC or like S Corp. I would make sure you have a good accountant. Leah actually helped me find my great accountant and bookkeeper. I had one that was not so great before that I felt like led me down a road where I ended up paying some taxes that I shouldn't have had to pay because I was still operating under a DBA. He also helps with bookkeeping and things like profit and loss statements. That kind of like comes later. I think at the very beginning I was able to do everything myself and just being really honest on taxes. So bookkeeping is really important. Paying your taxes is really important. Tracking your income is really important. When I got the gallery, I was still just working with one assistant, so myself and one assistant. I began to intern with students from the school. I trying to give them the business side of things, art handling side of things. So I still bring in students from IIA, as they're available that want to work, and I work with the school to pay them. And then I just hired one more full-time employee, and he's my first full-time employee. And I have one part-time employee. They're both good at different things, so figuring out who's good at what. I'm not the most structured person. I don't know if you figured that out already. So that's been an area that I really struggled with. So bringing people in to build structure, systems in the gallery has been really important. And then on the production sets, I pay everybody. I pay the people that, like I'm collaborating with, and it often looks like one or two technical assistants, so somebody like moving around lights, somebody helping with the computer and the wires and things like that, and that helps me be free to like kind of think and be more creative in the moment. So two technical assistants, and then Dina DeVore always does my hair and makeup and kind of styling. Sometimes it's really fun to have students styling, just you don't want to my art practice is probably very different, but it's like the most, like sometimes swells to like 8 people on set. Sometimes it's just me and one other person. It just really depends on where I'm at. If I'm out in the middle of the res, it's like, my husband or my kid holding the light, and just me and the person there. So just being like really flexible with that. I can make artwork in my closet, so I try not to get too hung up on how many people are helping, but it is fun to have, a big, huge set. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Hi. So I just have a question about, because I know you've shown in some museums, as you stated. So do you have like any specific protocols you relay with the museum in terms of representing your work in an exhibition? Just because I work for another artist in New York, and I know like she has some requirements with each museum she works with. It's like, you're gonna cover, my travel, my hotels, and the specific fee. Do you like have some sort of, have you like developed like an outline in terms of?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So museums are like so interesting, and I wish I had talked about this a little bit more, but I think one thing that they didn't teach me in school is that you would be like starting out, and then you would be considered emerging, and then you would be considered mid-career, and then you would be considered established. And I think for women in particular, like we stay in the emerging for a really long time. It's kind of like unfair, And I think during that emerging and even into mid-career, the other thing that they don't tell you is that you're paying for everything that's going into museums. Museums, I think, I looked it up, there's like 54,000 in the United States alone, and all of them have different budgets. Even some of the more, what we would consider prestigious museums don't have acquisition budgets, or they don't have budgets to do much programming. They're like heavy bureaucratic institutions. So I really try to get a sense of the museum. My assistants are like still learning, and they'll ask me a lot. They'll be like, do you want to do this? And like if it's for a Native museum, you're not asking for anything, right? Because their budgets are lower. As far as like loan fees for the artwork, I'm not getting loan fees for the artwork. I really approach museums. Some of them do offer them. I think that's very few and far between. I would rather be in the museum and put it on my CV. I think the other thing that they don't tell you is that you have to have inventory available to loan, and that's like a whole process where one of my employees helps me. If you don't have that inventory available to loan, then you need a gallery that's going to keep a repository of work that they don't need to sell that is available to loan. When your work's on loan, you're not making any money off of it, right? So there's like this great kind of limbo that happens with the artwork while it's at museums. Thousands of people are seeing it. You're getting provenance for the piece. It's going up in value, not just like cultural value, but also like monetary value at the same time. I really take it on a case-by-case basis. I look at going to museums and doing lectures as kind of more on the marketing side of things, like getting the word out, talking about the artwork, talking to people that are already interested in learning about your artwork. These are people that are going to end up in your life one way or the other. And I really have kind of this attitude of you really never know where these opportunities are going to come from. It's also often from what I call a daisy chain of events. Like, so for example, I made it into the MoMA, right, which seems like this radical, like crazy thing that I never imagined in a million years would happen. Native Arts and Culture Foundation asked me to do a talk at Site Santa Fe on the Friday in the middle of setting up Indian Market. And I was like, do you know that's Indian Market, right? And they were like, we do. Can you just come over? It'll take an hour and a half of your time. So I went over there. I showed up. I was kind of sweaty when I showed up. And I was like, oh, God. And we had just set up the booth. And I did this presentation with Rose Simpson and Jacqueline Rossell and Andrea Hanley. And that's kind of like all I remember about it. And then 2 weeks later, this 80-year-old woman comes into my gallery with a carafe of coffee and a scone. And she's like, I want to know more about your artwork. I saw you at Site Santa Fe. And then maybe like a couple months later, she buys some major pieces, totally unexpected. And then about a year and a half later, she says, I've been collecting Native women photographers since the 50s, and I've amassed the largest collection of Native women photographers. I'm 83 now, and I'm gifting my work to the MoMA. And they're picking 100 pieces, and they've selected your piece, right? And so if I hadn't gone over and done the sweaty interview for free, I would have never ended up in the MoMA, right? So I always say yes to everything. Museums, they pay for your travel and lodging and usually an honorarium, you know, and sometimes they give you a bigger honorarium and you have to pay for travel on your own. But I would say I still say yes to everything, and I'm just finally at an edge where I'm like, that's too much. I need to learn what to say no to, or my family is going to fall apart.
One last question.
Could you talk briefly about your water series and how you got those amazing shots?
Sure. So I had the idea to do the underwater series, and it kind of like came, I don't know, from a lot of different places. I was under an overpass in Vancouver where the pillars had been painted blue, like striations of blue, and I was asking the art tour guide, you know, what are the striations of blue? And they said that's what it looks like when the sea level rises 10 meters. And I just had this like catastrophic fantasy of sea level rising, and it began to think about contemporary issues of flooding, and then I began to think about historic issues of flooding and what it feels like when we go in the lake back home. And that was where I knew that I wanted to make these pieces, but I didn't know how to make underwater photographs. So that was in about February of 2015. I didn't photograph the pieces until about June of 2015. It took me that long to research underwater photography. I rented housing for my camera, and that was like a watertight seal where you can still control everything, and it had waterproof cords that would lead to lights going out on the outside. And then I began to look for a location. I think in my mind I thought I would go out to freshwater and just like be able to photograph underwater, but that doesn't provide the clarity for what you need. And so I knew it had to be in a swimming pool, so I started calling all of the local swimming pools. It's always like those weird questions, you know, like, hey, can I use your swimming pool? Click. Hey, can I use your swimming pool? And Diego was like, hey, they have a swimming pool at the El Rey Inn. And so I was like, do you think they'll let me use it? And he goes, I don't know, why don't we just like try and rent a room and use their pool? Those images were shot at the El Rey Inn. They did let me use their swimming pool when nobody would call me back to make the images. And as I was learning to use the underwater housing for the camera, I asked them, they helped me on like, it was before Zoom. What did we used to use? Skype. It was Skype, yeah. It was Skype, and I fired him in my bathtub to make sure like the camera was waterproof. And they were like, "Well, how are you going to sit on the bottom of the pool?" And I was like, "I don't know, like hold my breath." They're like, "No, like you're going to be floating all around. You really need to have scuba diving equipment." Well, I wasn't licensed to scuba dive, so I started the weird phone call that Cara does, the weird phone calls. And so I started calling all of the scuba diving centers in town, and I told them my dilemma, and they said, "Why don't you call Harvey Monroe? He's the only scuba diving instructor here in Santa Fe, and he might be able to help you out." So I called Harvey Monroe, who I'd never met. I said, "Harvey, I have $400. Will you come sit on the bottom of the pool with me for 2 days and tandem dive with me and help me with one of those vests?" And he goes, "Sure, sounds interesting. I'll do it." And so that's how those pieces were made. They were shot over 2 days with 3 sets of friends and family that had been affected by flooding, either in contemporary or historic times. I started with Cricket and Lisa to practice. I often shoot for 2 days and practice, especially if it's a technique that I don't know what I'm doing. So we practiced flipping around in the water. My kids held the lights outside of the pool. I think there were probably like 2,000 photos over 2 days. So I shoot a lot, making sure that if I've invested that kind of money, that was the first time I ever invested that kind of money in a photograph. And so I remember telling Diego about the idea and saying, "Well, why don't you make it?" And I'm like, "Well, I think it's going to cost too much money." And he just goes, "You have to invest in yourself." And it was something that I continued to learn the importance of. Yes.
Were you sad when the world went from a lot of photographers to digital?
She's asking if I was sad when the photography industry moved from film to analog. Yes, I was right in the middle of it. I started in black and white film. Did you have more of the question? I'm sorry. That's it.
Just trying to get the mic over there.
Okay, sorry. Yes, and I think there was I don't know, I think the really important question is we have a lot of pressure on us as artists to fit a mold, whether it's from our own medium, whether it's from, the mega art industrial empire, gatekeepers at museums, our community, the outside community deciding. You have to be able to take criticism, I think, is one thing that's really important in this conversation. In the photographic world, at the time that digital arrived, if it wasn't film, it wasn't fine art, right? And I left, I'm not able to use lighting and some other more sophisticated photography techniques that I was really interested in. I could develop film, I had the narrative, I knew storytelling, but I just didn't know enough about the medium. And so I went to Oklahoma State University for a vocational degree. It's an applied science for photography technology. And that was where I learned Photoshop and digital and large format and medium format. So it was like a cross training between film and digital. And even when I left school with a digital portfolio, the conversation was still digital will never match film, in this fine art or this art making process. And I really took that to heart for kind of way too long. And when I started art making again and showing up to the shows, I thought, well, actually, it's kind of really interesting to me that the entire light capture technique of what's happening is identical to film, and digital is here to stay. Is it interesting to make this beautiful archival artifact and pull it out of the digital world? And so water memory took first place, and I remember the photographers coming over and saying, "How did you do that? What category did you enter into?" And I was like, "It's computer-generated graphics," right? Because there was no digital photography section at SWAIA yet. And I think all of that to say I resisted, and then I just thought, and I began to embrace the digital darkroom. I couldn't leave to the dark room anymore with kids. I mean, I had toddlers sleeping under my desk, and so my digital dark room is probably as cool as the old dark room, minus the toxic solvents. And my kids were able to sleep, under my desk while I made artwork, and now it's accepted in museums. And so sometimes you're innovating, I think, when everybody's telling you like you're an outsider and this isn't accepted. Maybe you're innovating, and maybe you're a little bit ahead of the curve.
Thank you so much, Cara.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much.